So as I finished up yesterday, there were stuff appearing on Twitter mainly to begin with about airfields in eastern Poland shutting down to civilian air traffic due to a sudden military operation. And then there were allegations of the very quick allegations of an airspace incursion by Russian forces. The news disappeared almost as fast as it appeared, which raised questions about what actually took place. Because had it been like an actual attack by Russia against Poland, the news just would have been flooding the zone. There would have been article after article after article. It would have been all over social media, all tons of stuff. It it vanished very, very quickly. And that straight away was like, huh, there's something weird there. They closed the border with Belarus because of a Belarusian military exercise going on in Belarus, close to the Polish border. All right, fair enough. And the Polish put their military on higher alert. The imagery, so what is now understood is that there were a number of drones that entered Polish airspace and were subsequently crashed or were shot down, and were shot down by a variety of aircraft. And it resulted in a military aircraft response from, I guess, across Europe, and it also then resulted in the Poles calling for discussion under Article 4 of the NATO agreement as a discussion on what to do next. It's not Article 5, but it's discussion about what to do next. So it's not collective defence just yet. The imagery of the shot down drones or the destroyed drones took almost 24 hours to come out. Took at least 18 hours to come out. And that straight away raises questions about who, what, where, when. And as we were discussing this on the stream last night while I was playing Pillars of Eternity, my party was standing there complaining at me for not moving them while I was chatting to one of the viewers on stream who lived in Germany and was concerned about this being an escalation and everybody's afraid of Russia, and not quite at the point people are hiding under their beds, but it certainly seemed not far off. And I said, well, look, the most important thing to do when something like this happens is to sit on your hands and wait. You've seen reports, and that's what they are, they're reports, that something has happened. You need to wait for information to build and for the picture to clear before you can commit to action, or you should commit to action. Now, quite obviously, there were people who were responding militarily understood what was going on, at least thought they understood what was going on. What is not in dispute is that there was a penetration of Polish airspace by a number of drones that were then shot down or crashed. Okay, that much is accepted truth. The allegation, which seems to be the case at the moment, is that they were Russian origin. Now, launched by Russia. So that's the so now we're heading into speculative territory. We're moving away from fact into speculation. Supporting the idea that they were Russian in origin is the markings on the shot down drones, which suggests a Russian origin. The fact that there were Shahed drones involved, which the Russians have acquired from Iran and are using as well. And there are a couple of other elements that were strongly suggestive of them being Russian in origin. Okay. What is still unknown is who launched them and where they were launched from. Now, it's possible that there were nations in the area who had a very clear picture as to what was going on, I saw in the initial reporting that it was the Ukrainians who said, "Oh, these bad things are coming for Poland." That's I disbelieve that. Poland has, oh, and then someone saying, "Oh, it was an attempt to test Polish air defences." I also don't believe that. Poland has some very well established and well publicised systems, air defence systems within their borders, and there's probably very little interest from anyone to test them. Plus, they're an active member of NATO, and it would be expected that any substantive attack would draw substantive response. So I think the claim that it's an attempt to test Polish air defences can be dismissed quite readily. The imagery that I saw of the drones that were shot down were of a class that people called a decoy drone. It's a non-munition carrying drone, or wasn't carrying any munitions at all. And the explanation about it being a decoy drone is that they launch a whole bunch of non-munition carrying drones to overwhelm the existing air defense system, basically force the air defense systems to engage, run out of ammunition, etc., or force them to try and pick out of a swarm which ones are carrying munitions and which ones aren't, and basically induce doubt as to what's going on. And then there's a greater chance that the drones carrying weaponry can get through and get to their targets. So they're a decoy in terms of drawing attention away and assets away from those carrying weapons. The fact it was apparently only decoy drones that entered Polish airspace, okay. I mean, but there was a Shahed drone. The Shahed drones definitely carry weapons. Munitions were the ones that overflew Poland carrying it. That information I haven't seen, and I don't know if it's been published anywhere. So the question is, why was it only decoy drones, or the drones that people have identified so far? Why have they only been decoy drones? Is it possible that these drones could have reached Poland from Russian territory? Well, yeah, apparently the closest point of Russian territory to the points of entry is only about 68 k's, and some of these systems have hundreds of k's, potentially thousands of k's of range. All right, fair enough. So it's entirely possible it could have launched anywhere from where it entered back into Russia. All right, okay, fair enough. The next question is, were they intentionally targeting Polish airspace, or was it, okay, if we're assuming that they were Russian launched, was it potentially an error in setup? Were they misdirected for some particular reason? Was it a navigation failure on the drones? Did they fail in some way and therefore get misdirected? Okay, so that's kind of the most likely explanation if we're going for a Russian launch, that for whatever reason they missed whatever they were targeting in Ukraine and ended up flying on into Poland. Not the first time in history that aircraft have done something like that, or unmanned aircraft have done that. The US lost drones over Afghanistan that were alleged to have flown into Iran because of the loss of control of the drone. Yeah, not the first time that's happened in a conflict zone. Is it? Did the Iranians regard that as an attack by the US against them? No, they were quite happy to pick up the pieces, apparently. At least that's alleged to what's happened. So it's potential. I mean, it might have only taken, given the distances involved, it might have only been like a 5 or 10 degree error in heading, and you end up in Poland as opposed to Ukraine. And I mean, that could also be change in wind conditions. It could be a change in atmospherics. There's any number of reasons you could have a lateral error like that. Now, I'm guessing that the weapon carrying systems they're a little bit more careful with. The other part of it is the alternate is that they were launched by Ukraine from captured down drones that had been shot down or forced down or captured intact inside Ukraine, and that they were then launched by Ukraine as an attempt to escalate things. Okay, that requires a bit more evidence and a bit more, um, well, quite a lot more evidence in order to support the claim. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. Last time that a missile entered, well, when there were missiles flying over Polish territory and landing in Polish territory before, it was initially blamed on the Russians, but it was found to be, based on the photos, because it was pretty evident from the photos who owned the missile initially, that it had been a misfire from inside Ukraine. Well, an alleged misfire. Now, it's entirely possible the operator punched in the wrong heading and it flew off 180 degrees out of whack. It could have been the inertial systems, if they had inertial systems, weren't spun up and balanced properly, and therefore it was out of control from the moment it was launched. Could have been a whole bunch of reasons as to how it was fired from Ukrainian territory and landed in Poland. But you go with the most basic expectation, which is it was an error. Because if it was not an error and it was an intentional act, then that starts talking about intent and what the intended action or the intended outcome of such actions were, of why one belligerent is trying to draw NATO in, and it's not the one that people are expecting. So the fact that the articles appeared and disappeared very quickly suggested that there were nations or organizations out there that very clearly understood where these drones originated from and what they were doing and what they were carrying. The military response to force them down, yep, fair enough, that's going to happen. But talking to some of the Europeans yesterday, they were like getting scared about all this and that it's Russia pushing for escalating things. And it's like, well, where are you getting that from? And it's like the media saying it. And it's like, well, okay, again, it appeared and disappeared from the news very quickly, which suggests that there are people higher up in some of these systems that have a very clear understanding of what's actually taken place. And whilst they're not sharing that information openly, because that will then expose their gathering capabilities, they're tamping down the response because they have a better understanding of what actually happened. Now, they don't necessarily know exactly why it happened, but at least they can have a clearer picture as to, oh, right, yep, no, we got a pretty good idea. Maybe even the Russians, if they had done it by error, might have reached out through a secure channel and said, look, these were an accident. We're not going to say it openly, but these were an accident. It's quite possible. That sort of stuff will unlikely to ever be shared openly. Be nice if it was. That way we can understand what's going on. But yeah, probably not going to get shared. The whole reporting initially that, oh no, it was the Ukrainians that discovered it and alerted everybody. I don't believe that. I don't believe the Ukrainian air defense systems are that good compared to, well, some of the other systems there in the region that are providing targeting and target identification. Well, actually, no. They may not be providing targeting. That would be an escalation that the Russians would be aware of. Certainly providing information. So yeah, I reckon some of those other systems had a very clear picture, and were probably what alerted. And so Ukraine rushing to blame Russia in this and Russia that is another suggestion that maybe the line we're being fed isn't quite what happened. Maybe. We don't know. and I doubt we're ever going to find out. So, yeah, so obviously people rushing. I mean, the BBC here is going to be taking a particular stance. Dutch F-35s helped Poland, so that's where the German people were saying they heard aircraft screaming overhead. Um, Russia saying that that it wasn't deliberate. Okay, but again, I think this reading between the lines is saying that if it was Russian in origin, it was an accident. It was unintentional. Uh, but you're hearing this rhetoric of sabers being rattled and everything else. People who are a long way from having their blood spilled in conflict feel comfortable pushing inflammatory rhetoric when, again, the last big uh, set of weapons dropped on Poland came out of Ukraine. So it's, I mean, and that statement there is kind of telling as well, because it means that there are information channels that are open and information is flowing that isn't being shared, that is quite clearly de-escalating and or providing context as to what took place that is not being seen. And that that may be very, very likely. And yep, the difficulty with proving intention, GPS spoofing, I doubt that. Um, this is a very sensible statement, though. A caution against drawing conclusions based on snippets of information because it can lead to conclusions or lead to the incident appearing that something it is not. Okay? Ease the rhetoric off. Ease the rhetoric off. So, um, it's yeah. I mean, they're talking here obviously about them clearly being non-weapons carrying. Mm, interesting. I mean, obviously people are going to learn from it, and there's certainly going to be lessons learned from all of it. I'm surprised though that an AIM-120 can target, so the AMRAAM missiles that we use to help shoot them down. I'm surprised that an AIM-120 is capable of targeting something as small as a drone. And that they didn't engage with guns and things. So that would have been interesting. Um, yeah, uh, but it's what's not being said in articles like this that makes me think that the the, there aren't very many clean hands in this. Okay, so that was SBS talking about accidental or deliberate. Um, okay, so that was the article I just looked at. So, yep, Poland quite clearly shot down the drones after airspace incursion. So we're seeing pictures now of what some of the drones, the the again, I don't know how reliable information like this is. They're obviously trying to say that, yep, I mean, that's not a continuous track, despite what it appears. That implies greater reliability or greater information accuracy than is probably actually possible. Now, it's possible these ones here that went into Poland had overflown. I mean, it certainly looks like they've just continued on past the target. Sometimes that happens. But yeah, it, 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 it's worth seeing and waiting. Uh, Yeah, there was obviously another big attack with various missiles and drones as well elsewhere. I mean, there you go. This is misleading by the BBC because, okay, we're talking Russian did this, Russia did that, and then they're slamming this in between without saying who did it. And so the assumption you take away is, oh, that was Russia that did it, but it was a the missile that dropped and killed the farmers came from Ukraine. So yeah, it's clear the BBC has a well has a slant on what is going on.